What would you do if the person who had power over your job started using it to control you? Would you stay quiet, or would you speak up and risk losing everything? That question stayed in my mind for months. My name is Maya, and I was 27 when it all happened. I lived in a small coastal town in Ireland, where the streets were always wet, and the sound of the sea never stopped. I worked in a little café called the Morning Cup. It was not famous or big, but I liked it. The smell of coffee, the soft music, and the kind people made every day peaceful for me. I thought I had found a safe place. When I started at the café, my life was simple. I worked 6 days a week. I made coffee, cleaned tables, and sometimes helped with deliveries. My boss then was Mrs. Kelly, an older woman with silver hair and warm eyes. She was kind to everyone. She said, "Maya, this place runs on kindness, not rules." I believed her. She taught me everything I knew about running a cafe. I was not rich, but I was happy. My small room was above a bakery, and the smell of bread woke me up every morning. I did not have much family nearby, but I had a friend named Lena who lived 2 streets away. On Sundays, we met at the park and shared tea. Life was calm. Before we continue, tell me, what would you do if your boss made you feel unsafe at work? Would you speak up or stay quiet? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps me keep telling these stories. One Monday morning, Mrs. Kelly called me into the back office. Her hands were shaking. She said she was leaving for health reasons, and the cafe would have a new manager. I felt sad, but I wished her well. She said, "Maya, stay strong. Keep your head high." I did not know why she said it like that. A week later, he arrived. His name was Daniel Carter. He was in his mid-30s, tall, confident, and always wore shiny shoes. On his first day, he smiled at everyone and brought pastries. He said, "We're going to make this cafe the best in town." I wanted to believe him. He looked friendly and spoke with energy. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Daniel changed the coffee supplier, painted the walls, and added more tables near the window. He said he wanted the cafe to look fresh and modern. He liked to stand near the door, greeting customers with his wide smile. Sometimes he asked me for ideas, and I felt good when he listened. I thought maybe this was a new beginning for everyone, but after a few weeks, things started to feel different. Daniel began to act strange around me. He stood too close when we talked. He often said things like, "You're my best worker, Maya. You make this place shine." His words sounded nice, but his eyes made me uncomfortable. One evening, when everyone had gone home, he stayed behind. While I cleaned, he said, "You work too hard. You deserve a little fun. Let's go for a drink tonight." I laughed nervously and said, "Thank you, but I have to go home." His smile faded. He said, "Don't make me regret being kind to you." That night, I walked home through the rain. My hands were shaking. I felt afraid but also trapped. I needed the job, rent was due, and my savings were small. I told myself maybe he didn't mean it badly. Maybe I was imagining it. But I could not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his words again. The next week, Daniel's behavior grew worse. He gave me extra work and said it was because I was stronger than the others. He often called me into the back office for small things that could have waited until morning. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but I could feel the pressure behind his words. Once he said, "You should smile more, Maya. It makes customers happier." I felt small. One Friday evening, as I was cleaning the counter, Daniel came close again. He touched my arm and said, "You're wasting your talent here. You could go far with the right person to help you." I pulled my arm away and said I had to close up. He stared at me for a few seconds, then laughed softly. "Don't forget who signs your pay," he said. My heart beat fast, but I forced a smile and left. At home, I sat on the floor for a long time. I felt dirty, not from coffee stains, but from his words. I wanted to talk to someone, but I didn't know who. My friend Lena worked at a school. I didn't want to worry her. My parents lived in another town, and they thought I was doing fine. So I stayed silent. Each day, I went to work, pretending everything was normal, but inside, I was breaking. Then, 2 weeks later, a new barista joined the café. Her name was Sophia. She was 30, cheerful, and talked a lot about her travels. She said she had worked in many cafes before. On her first day, she smiled at everyone and said, "This place feels nice." I wanted to believe that again too. I showed her how to use the coffee machine and where to keep the supplies. She learned fast. After a few days, she said, "Daniel seems like a good manager." My hands froze for a moment. I looked at her and said, "Be careful. He likes attention." She looked at me with surprise, but I didn't explain more. A week later, she came to me after closing time. Her face looked pale. She said, "Maya, can I talk to you?" I nodded. She said, "He asked me to meet him at a restaurant tonight. He said he wants to discuss a special project, but the way he said it felt wrong." My chest felt heavy. I told her, "You did the right thing not to go." Then I shared my story. I told her what had been happening to me for weeks. She listened quietly. When I finished, she said, "He tried the same thing with me." We both sat there, silent. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. That night, we decided to do something. Sophia said, "We can't let him do this again." We didn't know how to act, but we wanted to try. I went home and searched online about workplace harassment. I read that we should collect proof, write everything down, and keep messages. The next morning, I started writing notes. Every time Daniel said something strange or gave extra work without reason, I wrote it in my notebook. Sophia did the same. We agreed not to talk to him alone anymore. A few days later, Daniel sent Sophia a message. It said, "You looked beautiful today. Let's meet after work." She showed it to me, and we saved it. My hands were shaking, but I felt strong. Now we had proof. We decided to go to the cafe's owner, Mr. Johnson. He lived in another city, but we found his email on the office board. We wrote everything that happened. It took hours to choose the right words. Before pressing send, I whispered, "This is our chance." The next morning, Daniel came in as usual, smiling as if nothing was wrong. He didn't know what we had done. We worked quietly, trying not to show our fear. That evening, an email arrived. Mr. Johnson said he would visit the cafe the next day. My heart jumped. I told Sophia, and we both agreed to be calm. When Mr. Johnson came, Daniel looked nervous. He greeted him politely, but Mr. Johnson didn't smile back. They went into the office. We couldn't hear what they said, but after 30 minutes, Daniel came out. His face was pale. He picked up his coat and left without looking at anyone. The bell on the door rang, and then he was gone. That night, I walked home under the streetlights, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel afraid. The air felt light. Sophia called me and said, "We did it." I smiled, but I also knew it wasn't over. Healing takes time. The fear had lived in me for too long. I looked at the sea and whispered, "I'm free." The next few days felt strange. The cafe was quieter than usual, and everyone spoke in low voices. Daniel was gone. But his shadow still stayed in the air. The sound of the coffee machine and the clinking of cups filled the silence that his voice used to fill. Some customers asked where he was, but no one gave an answer. Mr. Johnson came in one last time that week and spoke to us all. He said Daniel had been transferred to another branch and that there would be a new manager soon. He thanked everyone for working hard. When he left, Sophia and I looked at each other. We did not say anything, but we both knew the truth. At night, I could finally sleep. Still, some dreams woke me up. In my dreams, I was back in the cafe with Daniel standing behind me, saying my name in that slow, heavy voice. I would wake up and touch my pillow, feeling it wet with sweat. I told myself, "It's over. You are safe now." But healing is not something that happens in one day. It takes time, like waiting for a wound to close. Every morning, I walked past the same old houses, the smell of salt in the air, and the sound of the sea in the distance. The cafe was my second home, and even though I was scared for a while, I wanted to stay. I liked making coffee, watching people smile when they took their first sip. I liked the smell of the beans and the quiet before the first customer arrived. The place gave me peace again. Sophia helped me stay strong. She said, "We did the right thing, Maya. Never forget that." A week later, Mr. Johnson came again with the new manager. Her name was Mrs. Gomez. She was a woman in her 40s, with soft brown eyes and calm movements. When she entered, the cafe seemed to breathe differently. She smiled at everyone and said, "Let's make this place feel like home again." Her voice was gentle but firm, the kind of voice that made you feel safe without her saying much. After the meeting, she asked to speak with me in the back room. I was nervous. She closed the door and said, "I heard what happened here before. You were brave, Maya." I didn't know what to say. She smiled and added, "Thank you for standing up. People like you make workplaces better." I felt something I hadn't felt in months, respect. I said, "I didn't do it alone. Sophia helped me." She nodded. "That's even better," she said. "It means you built trust. We need more of that." When I came out of the office, I saw Sophia wiping the counter. She looked at me and smiled. I nodded, and we both understood that life might finally move forward. For the first time, I didn't look over my shoulder while working. I didn't worry about the sound of footsteps behind me. I didn't feel small. Mrs. Gomez changed many things in the cafe. She added plants near the windows, played soft music, and asked everyone for ideas. She said, "If you want this place to feel right, your voices must be heard." It was new for us. Before, Daniel made all the decisions. Now we worked together. I started to like coming to work again. One afternoon, Mrs. Gomez called me over. She said, "I noticed you are always careful with customers and patient with new workers. Would you like to learn more about managing the floor?" I was surprised. I said, "Me?" She smiled. "Yes, you. You have the heart for it." I didn't know how to answer. A few months ago, I was afraid of walking into the manager's office. Now someone was asking me to take responsibility. At home that evening, I thought about it for hours. I looked out my window at the street lights and the quiet town below. I remembered Daniel's words, the fear he used, and the pain I carried. Then I remembered Mrs. Gomez's words, gentle but strong. I realized something. Power is not bad when it is used to protect, not to harm. I wanted to learn that kind of power. The next day, I told Mrs. Gomez that I wanted to learn. She smiled and gave me a small folder. Inside were notes about suppliers, inventory lists, and how to make shift schedules. It looked difficult, but she said, "Take your time, I'll guide you." I felt nervous but also proud. A few days later, she asked me to help a new worker named Liam. He was 19 and shy. He dropped cups on his first day and looked ready to cry. I remembered my first day when I also felt lost. I said, "Don't worry, everyone breaks something in the beginning." He smiled weakly, and after that, he learned fast. Helping him made me feel stronger. It showed me that leadership did not mean control. It meant patience. Life at the cafe slowly became bright again. Customers started smiling more. Sophia and I often stayed late, cleaning together and talking about our plans. She said she wanted to open her own cafe one day. I told her maybe she would, and maybe I would help her. We laughed about it. Sometimes people came in asking about Daniel. They said, "Where is the old manager?" We simply said, "He doesn't work here anymore." No one asked more questions. Weeks passed, and I could see that the fear inside me was turning into strength. I started to talk more during meetings, giving suggestions. Mrs. Gomez often said, "Good idea, Maya." Every time she said that, my confidence grew a little more. I no longer doubted my worth. I began to believe that I could build something new from what had hurt me. But not everything healed easily. There were still days when a loud voice in the cafe made my heart jump. Sometimes I thought I saw Daniel's face in a crowd, but when I looked again, it was someone else. I realized that fear doesn't disappear. It just becomes quieter over time. I learned to breathe through it. One rainy morning, Sophia called in sick, so I had to open the cafe alone. The rain was heavy, and the street was empty. I turned on the lights and the music. As I was preparing coffee, I heard the bell ring. It was Mrs. Gomez. She smiled and said, "Good morning, early bird." I laughed. "Good morning." She helped me set up, and we talked about small things, the weather, the smell of rain, and how quiet mornings felt peaceful. Then she looked at me and said softly, "You've come a long way, Maya." I said, "Sometimes I still feel afraid." She nodded. "That's okay. Courage is not about never feeling afraid. It's about standing up even when you are." I felt tears behind my eyes. I said a thank you. She smiled. "You've already taught others how to stand up. That's more than many people ever do." Later that day, Sophia returned to work, still looking, tired but smiling. She said she missed the cafe. I told her, "Nothing changed while you were gone. It still smells like coffee and rain." She laughed. The laughter felt real again, not forced like before. One evening, Mrs. Gomez called everyone together. She said she wanted to make someone a shift leader to help with daily work. I did not think much of it until she looked at me and said, "Maya, would you take this role?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. My heart beat fast. I said, "Are you sure?" She smiled. "Completely." Everyone clapped softly, even Sophia. I felt my hands shaking, but not from fear, this time from joy. It was not about power or title. It was about respect. I thought of Mrs. Kelly's words from long ago, "Keep your head high." I finally understood what she meant. That night, I walked home under the street lamps again. The sea wind was cold, but it felt clean against my face. I called Lena and told her everything. She said, "I'm proud of you." I smiled and looked at the dark water. The town looked the same, but I was not the same. I had changed. I learned that silence gives power to the wrong people, and courage gives it back to you. I was not special, not stronger than anyone else. I was simply tired of fear. And when fear becomes too heavy to carry, the only way to survive is to set it down. Sometimes I still pass by the corner where Daniel first talked to me. I no longer feel small there. Instead, I remember how far I have come. I remember that day when Sophia and I pressed send on that email. That one small act changed everything. Now, when I see someone at work looking scared or unsure, I tell them what Mrs. Gomez told me. Courage is not about never feeling afraid. It's about doing the right thing, even when you are. The morning after I became shift leader felt strange. I woke up early, before the alarm. The rain had stopped during the night, and the street below my window was still wet and shiny under the first light. The smell of bread from the bakery downstairs filled the air, and I thought about how far life had brought me. I had gone from being afraid to walk into work to standing tall in that same place. It still felt unreal. I made some tea and watched the sea from my window. The sky was soft gray, and the waves looked calm. It was a quiet start to what would become one of the most important days of my life. At the café, everyone was already busy. Liam was making coffee, and Sophia was taking orders. When I walked in, they both smiled. Liam said, "Good morning, boss." I laughed and told him, "Don't call me that. I'm not your boss, just your helper with a little more paper to sign." He smiled back. It felt good to joke again. The cafe smelled of cinnamon and roasted beans. The music played softly, and the customers chatted in low voices. It felt like peace had returned. Mrs. Gomez came out from the office with her tablet. She said, "Maya, I need you to handle the morning shift report today. It's good practice." I nodded and took the notes. She added, "You'll be fine. You already know this place better than anyone." I thanked her. She trusted me, and that trust made me want to do better. As I wrote down the sales and supplies, I thought about how much had changed since the months when Daniel was here. There was no shouting now, no strange looks, no fear. People talked freely and laughed again. I realized that when people feel safe, they work with heart. It was something Daniel never understood. He thought control was power, but real power is kindness, and kindness is harder to use because it asks for honesty every day. Around noon, the cafe was full. The sun finally came out, and people filled the tables near the windows. Sophia was busy taking orders, and I helped Liam carry trays. I noticed a young woman sitting alone near the back. She was new. She wore a gray coat and looked nervous, holding her cup with both hands. When I walked by, she smiled politely but didn't say anything. After a while, she came to the counter. She asked in a soft voice, "Are you hiring?" I said yes and asked if she had any experience. She said she had worked in another cafe before, in a nearby town. Her name was Eva, and she looked about 24. I gave her a form to fill out and told her Mrs. Gomez would review it later. While she was writing, I noticed her hands were shaking a little. Something about her reminded me of myself months ago. After she left, I turned to Sophia and said, "She looked scared, didn't she?" Sophia nodded. "Yes, a little. Maybe she's just shy." I said nothing more, but my mind stayed on her face. 2 days later, Eva returned for an interview. Mrs. Gomez spoke with her for a while, then came out and said, "She's joining us part-time. She starts next week." I smiled and said, "I'll help train her." Mrs. Gomez agreed. When Eva began, she was quiet but hardworking. She followed every instruction carefully, never made noise, and said sorry even when it wasn't needed. I tried to make her feel comfortable, asking small questions about where she lived and what she liked to do. She said she lived with her aunt and had moved after some trouble at her last job. I didn't ask more, but I could see something was hurting her. One day, we were closing the café together. The others had already gone home. As we cleaned the counter, she said softly, "Maya, can I tell you something?" I said, "Of course." She looked around, then said, "At my old job, my manager made me feel uncomfortable. He sent messages late at night, asking to meet. When I said no, he cut my hours. I didn't know what to do." My chest felt tight as I listened. It sounded too familiar. I said gently, "You did the right thing leaving." She shook her head. "I didn't leave. I was fired. He said I wasn't a good worker." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Her story felt like mine from another time, another place. I said, "Eva, I understand you. I've been through something similar." Her eyes widened. "You have?" I nodded. "Yes. But you're safe here. No one will treat you that way." She looked down, and her eyes filled with tears. I put my hand on hers and said, "You're not alone anymore." That night, after she left, I stayed behind to lock up. The cafe was dark except for the small light above the counter. I sat there for a while, thinking about how many women go through what we went through. I felt sad but also proud, because now I was in a place where I could protect someone else. Over the next few weeks, Eva became more open. She started to laugh at jokes, talk with customers, and even stay after work sometimes to chat with Sophia. One evening, she said to me, "I didn't think I could work again without fear." "But you made it easy." I smiled and said, "You did that yourself. You're stronger than you think." The cafe was not just a workplace anymore. It was a place where broken people could heal quietly, without judgment. Mrs. Gomez often said, "Kindness can build stronger walls than fear." I believed her more each day. One morning, a man came into the cafe. I was near the counter, arranging cups. When I looked up, my stomach turned cold. It was Daniel. He stood there, wearing the same shiny shoes, holding a newspaper. For a moment, everything around me stopped. He looked at me and smiled lightly, as if nothing had happened. "Long time, Maya," he said. I froze, but then Mrs. Gomez came out of the office. She saw him and walked straight to the counter. Her face was calm. "Good morning," she said. "How can we help you?" Daniel said, "I'm here on business. I was in the area and thought I'd visit my old place." His voice was smooth, but his eyes still had that same sharpness. Mrs. Gomez said politely, "You are welcome to sit and have coffee like any other customer, but please don't disturb my staff." He looked at her, then at me and said, "Of course." He took his coffee and sat near the window. My hands were shaking, but I took a deep breath. Mrs. Gomez touched my shoulder and whispered, "You're safe." Those words gave me strength. I continued working, refusing to look at him. After a few minutes, he finished his drink and left without another word. When the door closed, my knees felt weak. Mrs. Gomez said, "You handled that well." I said, "I felt scared again." She nodded. "That's natural, but you didn't hide, and that's courage." That evening, I went for a walk by the sea. The waves were strong, crashing against the rocks. I stood there watching them, thinking about how fear never fully disappears, but it loses power when you face it. I thought about Eva, about Sophia, about all the women who still stayed silent. I promised myself I would never stay silent again. A few days later, I told Mrs. Gomez I wanted to organize a small talk at the café about workplace respect. She smiled and said, "That's a beautiful idea." We invited some regular customers and young workers from nearby shops. I shared my story without naming anyone and spoke about how speaking up changed my life. Eva also shared a few words. Her hands shook, but her voice was clear. After we finished, people clapped softly. One woman said, "I wish I had heard this earlier." That night, I walked home under the stars, feeling light. I had turned my pain into something useful. It no longer owned me. I had used it to help others. Months passed, and the cafe continued to do well. People said it had a warm feeling, and I knew why. It wasn't just the coffee or music, it was the peace that honesty brought. One evening, while closing, I found a small note near the counter. It was from Eva. It said, "Thank you for making this my safe place." I held the note for a long time. When I got home, I placed it inside my old notebook, the one where I had written everything Daniel ever said to me. I kept that notebook not as a memory of pain, but as proof that courage changes lives. I whispered to myself, "You crossed the line, Daniel," but I crossed back stronger. Now when I tell this story, I don't tell it to get pity. I tell it because someone out there might be living in fear and thinking they are alone. I want them to know they are not. Speaking up might be hard, but silence hurts more. I am not the same Maya who used to walk home in tears. I am a woman who found her voice, and I use it now, for myself and for others. Fear tried to control me once, but it failed. Because courage, when spoken out loud, is stronger than fear whispered in silence. If you liked my story, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Maybe they are afraid to speak. Maybe they are still silent like I once was. Your share could help them find courage too. And if you are learning English through stories like this, remember to subscribe, like, and comment below. Tell me, have you ever faced something unfair at work or in life? How did you stay strong? I would love to read your story in the comments.